Hello, hello, hello. Back once again to do Mio on MMA. And, oh, damn, that does sound very echoey right now. I don't know why. I'll have to see how it records. But anyways, it is time to talk about another UFC card. This time we are going to Mexico City for the UFC at the Arena CDMX. Mexico City. Boom. There you go. And this card is a lot like the UFC London card, which I'm going to quickly give some thoughts on because I didn't get to do a recap of it because the pop filter on my microphone had gone AWOL, and I was waiting for a new one to arrive. It's here. Hopefully things are a little bit better sound quality wise, although I'm not liking the acoustic situation right now. But we will soldier through and get through this. Usual stint here when I'm talking about betting on fights, and I will be talking about who I think is going to win, technical breakdown. I'll be talking about the betting odds. I'll be talking probably even a little bit about what I'm going to do for betting. It should be mentioned that this is purely a little bit of extra spice. Betting on MMA, betting on anything, but betting on MMA in particular, is not a path to financial freedom. This sport is too chaotic, too unpredictable to be reliably throwing down your paycheck on these fights. Don't do that. Just a little bit of extra money. I put a little aside at the beginning of the year. That's my betting fund. If it goes to zero, it goes to zero, and we don't bet no more. That has not actually happened yet, but that's probably also because I'm a very cautious bettor in that regard. So let's talk about the UFC London card. Sean Brady versus Leon Edwards was the main event, and basically this fight was, for about 4 minutes, what I thought it would be. And in a good way, because Sean Brady came out and he was getting into Edwards' face, and he was making him fight him. He's making him uncomfortable. That is what you have to do against Leon Edwards. But Edwards was generally getting the better of the striking. He was landing the cleaner strikes, the crisper strikes, some nice body kicks, etc. There wasn't really a takedown threat from Brady, because Brady's big issue going forward, and I don't think this fight really put to rest this issue, is that he's still actually not that great at forcing a clinching grappling game on an opponent that doesn't give it to him. Because even in this fight, like at various points, Edwards gave it to him, and that's why he was able to have the wrestling and grappling success that he was. But this is a step in the right direction. This is a step in the proving that he can pathologically be aggressive and pressuring without falling apart, without getting tired. That was the key. And then, yeah, he took this fight over down the stretch and eventually gets the win via submission, via choke over Leon Edwards. It's a big win for him. Obviously, he's going to have an issue when it comes to title contention or anything like that, because obviously he's one of the very, very few people that Bilal Muhammad has finished. So it's very hard to make that a rematch happen. And the other problem is that he does not have what you would call a fan-pleasing or Dana White-pleasing fighting style. And that's always going to be a bit of a problem if you're not a draw and you're not exciting to Dana himself. It's going to be very, very hard. I mean, we literally just saw that with Bilal Muhammad, how long it took him to get a title shot. And if you want a historical example, John Fitch is the classic example. John Fitch had to do a lot to get a title shot, a lot more than anyone else did. And that is the boat that Sean Brady finds himself in. But he did well. He went out there. He performed very, very well. He's 32 years old, so he still has 3-4 years, maybe even more, because it's 170 of like prime time to possibly get better. And that's about it, really, all I have to say about that fight. The 205 fight between Jan Blachowicz versus Carlos Ulberg was not very good. A lot of people are claiming it was a robbery, and I just don't get it. Like I gave round 1 to Blachowicz fairly cleanly, but rounds 2 and 3 I scored for Ulberg, and they could go either way. I'm not complaining if you're sitting there being like, I scored it for Blachowicz, that's fine. The second and third round don't have a lot to pick between them. It just came down to Ulberg landing some slightly more shots, and I thought maybe even slightly better shots. But if you scored them for Jan, that would be fine. But the robbery label that's being thrown around is just wrong. It's a disappointing fight because obviously when you put a former champion, former top guy in the division, still top guy in the division, but a guy who is, one would think, on the way down in his early 40s against one of the best up-and-coming prospects, you're hoping for something more than what we got. And that's the disappointment there. So Alberg gets the win. He does continue to roll, but I don't think his stock rose. Because I think if you were picking him to win, like I was, you were hoping for something more. And the people who think he lost, obviously, and that this was a robbery, obviously it doesn't go up in their eyes either. Kevin Holland beat Gunnar Nelson in a fight that was pretty fun, actually. This was probably the last, I'm going to go rewatch this fight probably a couple of times. And I'm going to hate parts of it because some of it is Kevin Holland being pretty dumb. But at the same time, Holland was just when he was on his back, he was working him. When he was on the feet, he was working him. And it was... I don't want to say that it dawns on me that Holland can be something. The problem is that part of me knows Kevin Holland is capable of immense things. He has the physical abilities and the right mindset when he focuses to do really good, really cool stuff. There's a lot of really good Kevin Holland performances. They're just also separated by some really terrible performances. And he'll probably be right back onto that before long. Alexa Thainara made short work of Molly McCann. I guess I'm a little surprised that it was quite how it was, but the dynamic of the fight I thought was pretty clear. Molly is going to end up on bottom at some point, and Thainara actually has a pretty aggressive top game that has a little bit of ground and pound, a little bit of threading submissions. So yeah, I'm not. Also, Molly retired after the fight, so there's always that whole, is a fighter at their best when they're already thinking about retirement? And the answer is generally no. So there's that problem. I will say Chris Duncan impressed me against Jordan Vucenic. I don't know if I have to up my estimation of Duncan or I have to really tamper down my estimation of Vucenic. I don't know which, but that fight played out very differently than what I thought. I did not think Duncan was going to be able to just kind of honestly, just kind of bully Jordan Vucenic and get a finish. That was weird. Nathaniel Wood, Morgan Charrier, that was exactly what I called. Don't watch the third round of this fight. Just enjoy the first two rounds. Nathaniel Wood getting the win there. I did not watch Jai Herbert versus Chris Padilla. I watched these fights after they happened. And I saw I looked at the UFC stats. I looked at the reaction for the Padilla versus Herbert fight, and it wasn't very good. So I watched the first round to kind of give it a shot. And there was nothing that I wanted to watch beyond that. So I didn't watch that. I cannot comment. Padilla getting the split decision win, if I recall. I literally I don't even know if I remember who won that fight correctly. I'm not kidding. If you're looking for me to tell you exactly who won that fight, I didn't watch it. I think I did read that Chris Padilla got the split decision though. So there is that. But there's nothing strong about that fight for me. Loney Kavanaugh did fought Felipe Dos Santos. I thought he won the second and the third round. Fought at a decently high pace. I don't know. I'm still worried that he doesn't force a pace on people. That he's quite. I don't know. It feels like he is absolutely capable of being a very, very good fighter, but there is a lack of him. There's a lack of him enforcing that on the fights that he's in, and that's going to worry me a little bit. I didn't really watch Marcin Tybura versus Mick Parkin either, so I have no thoughts on that fight other than Tybura won. There you go. Christian Leroy Duncan versus Andre Puliev. About what I expected. Puliev's problem is that he just doesn't have enough physicality to his game. His game is I'm tall and that should be enough. And don't get me wrong, at middleweight that will be enough for some people. There are some people he's just going to be taller and longer than, and they're not going to have the footwork, or they're not going to have the ability to keep forcing the fight in close, or whatever. And he'll pick up some wins, but not against anyone particularly good. Shanna Bannon versus Puja Tomar. This was bad. Like, I don't know. I have no real faith in the Indian scene to produce much right now. And the frustration thing with Tomar is like, there's the right physical attributes to be a reasonably good, reasonably solid strawweight there. And she showed like none of it. She couldn't be consistently aggressive against someone who was just sidekicking. And did knock her down. But then the worst takedown, the worst armbar defense I've seen in some time at a UFC level. Like the initial entry to the armbar from Bannon, actually pretty slick. But then she lost it, and Tomar just put herself back into it. It's not good. It's not good. And Guram Kutaladze looked bad against Cowie Fernandez. I'm skipping the Colin Lockard versus Nathan Fletcher fight. I had Fletcher winning that fight. He just did more, I thought, cleaner stuff. But at the same time, like, his limitations as an athlete, his limitations as a physical specimen were on display. He couldn't stop Loughran from having the fight that Loughran wanted. I do think he beat him in it, but not being able to stop him from doing the things that he was doing obviously made it, you get what you can't not expect, I guess, in a nutshell. If you're going to let Loughran have the fight that he wants, then there's a good chance that the referees or the judges, I should say, are just going to fall for it. And that kind of was it. Onwards to this week's fights, which are pretty good because mostly, for one thing, there are only 2 fights, I think, above 155 pounds here, which is always good because even when the UFC throws like leftovers on their bantamweight fights, they're still good. Same with like featherweight, same with lightweight, flyweight a little bit to a certain degree. Anyways, those 4 divisions kind of cook, and the fact that mostly that's what we're getting means that this is pretty good. Now, is it heavy on like meaningful fights or the absolute top talent in the world? Not really. It's basically just the main event with Brandon Moreno versus Steve Erceg, and I guess there is a hope that Joe Pyfer or Raul Rosas Jr. will turn into something. But the fact that they are respectively fighting Kelvin Gastelum and Vince Morales is kind of indicative of how close they are to actually coming up with that. And then like further on down, I'm just looking, is there someone I have a lot of hope for? And the answer is just no. But they're going to be good, fun action fights. So I guess it's good enough. I don't know. I feel like my expectations for the UFC are just like, they've been defeated by the UFC's own actions. Brandon Moreno versus Steve Erceg. I want to say this. I really like Steve Erceg. I do. He has good counterboxing, good, like, well-structured boxing. Clearly takes the sport very seriously, tries to learn, tries to become better. He's a grappler by nature. He's got submissions. He's got pretty decent wrestling for a guy who looks kind of awkward. He's a good scrambler. He is in great shape. And he is making the absolute most of what he is. The problem is I do think that he just has a hard ceiling. I said this when he came in and beat David Dvorak even. I just like, this guy will surprise some people because he's like really good. Like, he has a game plan. He responds to coaching. He adapts in fights. And like, he is trying to be the absolute best fighter he can be. And some people do not do that. But there is not enough power, speed, explosiveness to really do it at flyweight. And that is the limitation factor. It's just you don't have the athletic ability to be at the very, very top end of this division. Now, obviously, that's still enough to beat Matt Schnell. That's still enough to beat David Dvorak. That's still enough to beat Alessandro Costa. So, like, there is no shortage of guys that he can beat. Even if we just looked at this card and we're like, all right, we're going to look at all the flyweights on this card. Who would Steve Erceg get my pick against? And there's a couple of fights here. So you got, let's see, Edgar Chairez and CJ Vergara. Pick him easily against both those guys. Rolando Rodriguez, Kevin Borges. I would pick him easily against both those guys. I would even pick him against Simon Oliveira, who's a 135er on this card, or Vince Morales, who's a 135er on this card. So, he's still going to get my nod. He's still going to get picked a lot. But Brandon Moreno is one of those guys at the very top of the division. Former champion, a guy who in his own right can be trying to be the best fighter possible. It's not consistent, and that's the frustration. He's not been the same guy since the James Krause incident, where James Krause was busted for basically insider trading when it came to mixed martial arts fights in the UFC. And as a result, he was banned from... He basically got blackballed in the sport, which he should. And as a result, it's been a hectic time for Moreno to kind of find that confidence, that comfort, that place again. Because every fight except for that one fight with Brandon Royval, which was terrible, you see elements of the old Brandon Moreno, the elite Brandon Moreno. But then you will also see elements of this kind of just very sloppy version of Moreno, and that will make me worry. But like, he did look pretty good against Emir Albazi, so like he has the same tools as Erceg as a technician. They don't fight the same. I'm not trying to say that this is a mirror match like Marvin Vettori and Roman Dolidze, Joe Rogan being absolutely sold on the idea that was a mirror match for some reason. I don't know why. But they do have like the same fundamental mold. They're both guys who are surprisingly adept boxers for MMA fighters. They are good scramblers. They have a submission game, and they do weaponize pace a fair bit. Like, they both will fight at a higher pace, a reasonably high pace. Moreno, I think, more so. But that's the thing, is that Moreno just has that athletic X factor. He has the explosiveness, the power, the speed, etc. All of those things. His problem is just getting his head straight, getting in the right head place to be the best Brandon Moreno possible. And as a result, you've got to pick him here, probably by TKO. Erceg is not exceptionally durable, so I just see at some point Moreno getting him in trouble. Probably like third or fourth round, not early, but he'll get him out of there. And the betting odds have Moreno as the favorite, minus 230 to minus 250. Erceg at plus 190 to plus 200. Feels about right. There's a couple of betting odds lines on this card that do not feel right, but that is not one of them. And then in the co-main event, we have Manuel Torres versus Drew Dober. I hate to break this fight down to a simple fact because it's a really fun fight in a co-main event, but it's father time. Dober is 36 years old. He has looked older in recent fights, and prime Dober, young Dober, would win this fight because Manuel Torres he's very, very aggressive, very, very violent early, but like, his game falls apart if you survive and weather the storm. And that was kind of something that Dober was very good at because, number one, his head is shaped to take punishment. Look at that chin. His head is a lantern. And as a result, he would be able to take that punishment and like just come back. The question is does that Dober still exist? Does that Dober who can take a bit of a beating and like come back and start throwing like, some hot hands back at the opponent and take it over, maybe even utilize some wrestling if he needs to, and pick up the win. And I think that guy still exists, and I'm picking him by TKO because Torres does break down like as the fight goes on. But I can't say that I'm super confident about it because 36 is that kind of... It's that magical time when fighters start to break down. And, of course, we did just see Dober kind of get shellacked by John Silva. So, I'm worried. Silva is a better fighter than Manuel Torres, though, by a significant margin. So that's about an even money fight at plus 102 to minus 112 for Torres, minus 110 to minus 122 on Dober. You could bet either way on that one if you felt like it. Kelvin Gastelum versus Joe Pyfer. It's the pick. I've got him by decision because Gastelum's still very, very tough. The problem with Gastelum is I just can't trust him. He's a 5'9" guy. He should be at welterweight. Speaking as a fellow fatty who has a hard time keeping the weight down, that is Kelvin Gastelum. And on top of that, Gastelum is very inconsistent. He's undisciplined. It's very notable that like almost every gym he's been at has made the same note that he is kind of lazy, kind of hard to coach. There are days when he's really good, but there are days when he is really crap. And I can't rely on that for an undersized guy. I just can't. Like he's got the physical tools. He's durable. He's got good cardio even when he is fat. He's explosive. His boxing is surprisingly good at times and absolutely crap at others. And he's got a wrestling background, and he's got everything you want. But and Joe Pyfer is not anyone's idea of like a complex problem solver, but Joe Pyfer hits really hard. He has an explosive takedown, and he's big. He's 6'2", 75-inch reach at 185. He's properly sized for the division. He's big for the division, honestly. And I got to go with him. The odds are Pyfer at minus 310 to minus 335. It's maybe a little too wide. And Gastelum plus 240 to plus 250. Raul Rosas Jr. Now, this is a betting line that I do think is too high. I am picking Raul Rosas Jr. here. And I know I'm a Rosas Jr. hater because, for example, people were labeled me as such when I picked him to lose to Christian Rodriguez, and he did. And when I picked him to lose to Ricky Turcios and Arichi Lang, which, in fairness, he won those fights. That Lang fight is not good, but he won it. And Turcios, he convincingly beat. But at the same time, I don't know. Maybe it's just like anytime somebody's like, I'm going to be the youngest champion ever. And it's just, I don't know. It's like, slow your roll, kid. Honestly, as the sport develops, I think that we'll see less and less of that, actually being a thing. Like, people who actually even fight for a title at the age of, what John Alessio did when he fought Pal Miletich, or John Jones, of course. It's just not really going to be on the table. Or if it is, it's going to be in the women's weight classes, I think, more so than the men's weight classes. Rosas Jr. is still a very, very basic fighter. He is a takedown chaser and a submission artist. He is pretty non-existent on the feet. Vince Morales is going to look like a really, really, really top-end boxer against him, I think. And Morales is hard to control. He's hard to out-scramble. He's hard to do things with. His losses historically have involved someone bringing a more multi-dimensional game, or if it is one-dimensional, Taylor Lapalus, for example, or Jonathan Martinez, it's just not Rosas' game, in any way, shape, or form. The guys who have managed to, honestly, I don't even know what guy's performance against him. I guess you could say Domingo Pilarte back on Dana White Contender Series in 2018 would be your answer, because he won by rear naked choke. And, that is how Raul Rosas Jr. generally likes to win his fights. But I don't know. It's just really, really hard for me to even picture how that looks. But at the same time, it's also really hard for me to picture how Morales wins. You know what I mean? I see Morales making him work hard for every step of the way. But I assume Rosas has 15 minutes of cardio. I assume. I may be wrong. And as long as he can not gas out, he can be the guy who's just that little bit ahead. And I'm winning by decision, but at the same time, this should not be minus 480 to minus 500. This should not be plus 330 to plus 370 for Morales. I know Morales' record in the UFC is quite bad. I understand that. I get that. He's a guy who's been cut, I want to say twice, by the UFC. Hang on. Let us review for a moment. Yeah, so he lost on Contender Series, didn't get in the UFC. Did get in the UFC a little bit later, lost to Yanong Song, Benito Lopez, and Chris Gutierrez, but beat Ayman Zahabi, Draco Rodriguez, and Luis Mocha. Lost to Jonathan Martinez, Miles Johns. He gets cut. Okay, so I'm thinking of the Dana White Contender Series. Maybe that's why I'm thinking he's on his third run here. He technically is, I guess. Beat Teruto Ishihara and some regional talent, including Hunter Azur. And then he ends up in the UFC again, loses to Taylor Lapalus and Elijah Smith. I know that the record looked bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 losses and 3 wins. So yeah, 3 and 7. That looks quite bad. But I think you got to realize that Raul Rosas Jr. at some point just is not actually that good. But hey, he's only lost to Christian Rodriguez, so there you go. So I am picking him to win, but I think that these betting odds are dumb. David Martinez versus Simon Oliveira. I'm going to go with David Martinez. There is an X factor here, and that is that Martinez is from the Combate Global scene, which is been really just kind of famous for like basically being like a higher, more fancy version of Explode Fight Series, or like better at doing what Explode Fight Series did, which was produce basically highlight reels for fighters who had, a lot of physical gifts and everything, but their fights were not really meaning much. And that's honestly my read on the David Martinez fights up until this point. That being said, Simon, he does seem like a good athlete. He does seem like he hits hard. Seems like a pretty decent striker. He doesn't give off the vibes of like a Jonathan Wilson, to use an Exploit Fight Series example, Johnny Bravo, where he came into the UFC and it's like, this guy is definitely very athletic, but he's also very, very shit. Martinez doesn't give that vibe off. It's just, at the same time, he gives off the vibe of somebody who hasn't really faced a lot of pushback, and that always worries me. Because Oliveira is like, he's going to push back. Like, Oliveira's been put in bad spots and fought his way out of them. So, we're going to see a little bit of that. But Oliveira's problem is, number one, he's just physically limited to begin with. He's 5'4", 67 inch reach, basically, at 135. So he's just got a limited frame to begin with. And on top of that, he's not really a great wrestler. And the best thing about his game is that he hits things from front headlocks, like guillotine chokes and Bravo chokes, anaconda chokes, that kind of thing. Like, it's not a game that's really replicable, because it's great for like fighting against people who are going to make you grapple a lot and maybe be like more dangerous than they expect. Like it actually wouldn't surprise me if he, for example, was able to choke Raul Rosas Jr. But he doesn't have a functional striking game. So Martinez by decision, but maybe a little bit too much of a favorite at minus 400 to minus 420, and plus 285 to plus 320 for Oliveira. Rolando Rodriguez, Lazy Boy versus Kevin Borges. This is interesting because it's a battle of a guy who I don't trust because he's very not flyweight. That's Rodriguez. And a guy I don't trust because he's very flyweight but has like no flavor in Borges. So what do I do with that? Like, because Rodriguez's issues, he doesn't really work in the volume I'd like to see at flyweight, essentially. But he is strong, powerful, and he has a game that like it screams featherweight or bantamweight more so than flyweight. I'm not saying he should go up because he's 5'6" with a 65 inch reach. Don't, if you're making 125 comfortably, and as far as I can tell he is, keep doing your thing. But it's a weird game to have developed as a flyweight. So he's going to go out there and he is going to pressure. Borges is a good counterpuncher. And I'm assuming that Rodriguez at some point will just hurt him and probably hit him with a club and sub. So that's kind of it. But like, it's just kind of weird that Rodriguez is a guy who really doesn't have a way of winning fights without stoppages at flyweight, because you kind of need that. And Alessandro Costa, that being said, Alessandro Costa did do to Borges what Lazy Boy kind of wants to do. So, there you go. Betting odds-wise, Rodriguez is the favorite, minus 148 to minus 164. Borges plus 120 to plus 128. Edgar Chairez versus CJ Vergara, the battle of the two gatekeeper prospect testers. And they're prospect testers for a reason. Like, they're both pretty game even when they're getting their butts beaten, which is a big deal. They come back from adversity well, particularly Vergara. Vergara is a guy who gets hurt a lot and he recovers, he keeps going. Vergara is your basic wrestle boxer. Chairez is a little bit more interesting in the sense that he'll attack a lot more on the ground with submissions, and he has just generally a really good frame for the division. He's 5'7" with a 72 inch reach. It's not anything outstanding, but 72 inches, like, for comparison purposes, again, we have a couple of flyweight fights on this card, and it's like he's got 4 inches on Vergara. He's got 4 inches on Borges. He's got 7 inches on Rodriguez. He's got a longer reach than Martinez and Oliveira. He's got a longer reach than Rosas Jr. or Morales. Like, it's a big frame for the division and like good power and stuff. So I'm gonna go with Chairez by TKO. Again, Vergara gets hurt and like gets away with it because he's good at recovery. I would hope, I would think, I would want Shirez to be veteranly composed enough to hurt Vergara at some point and actually finish him instead of letting him have the time, the opportunity, and the space to recover. And also to not completely do the opposite, which is completely blow your gas tank out trying to get that finish. So I got Shirez. People are with me apparently. Minus 258 to minus 295. Vergara plus 210 to plus 225. Not even going to talk about this Atiba Gauthier versus Jose Medina fight, honestly, because Medina shouldn't be in the UFC. I'll compliment Medina plenty. Dude is tough. Dude has heart. Dude is in surprisingly good cardiovascular shape for his body type. He tries really hard. There is just nothing there. There is a negative athletic quality to this guy. And I'm not going to say he can't win a middleweight fight, but he lost badly to Zachary's. He lost pretty badly on Contender Series to a guy that we now know is not very good. And that is, I'm not even remembering his name. That's how much I don't really factor him into my equations and thoughts about the UFC. Magomed Gaziyashilov. That's who it was at 205. He just does not have it. And do I know that Atiba Gauthier has it? No, he has a very thin record. He's got a win over a guy who's 2-23, a guy who's 0-0, 0-1, 1-0, 17-13-1, and then his win over Yura Naito on Contender Series, who himself does not have a deep or convincing record. So, do I know? No. But he does seem to be an athlete of sorts. He does seem to hit hard. And he definitely has a great frame for this division. He's 6'4", 81 inches in reach. He has the makings of something good. He's just unproven. He's green. Whereas Medina does not have the makings of a UFC middleweight. I'm sorry. He may win because the not being UFC caliber is not stopping people from getting signed by the UFC, but no, there's not anything to be interested in here. I am sorry. And the betting odds reflect that. Gauthier, despite being very green, is minus 400 to minus 460, and Medina is plus 300 to plus 340. And this isn't even like a Carlos Vera and I'm blanking. Josias Musasa. Was that who it was? It was whoever Carlos Vera fought recently, and I picked Vera to lose, but I said that the betting odds were way too wide because you had somebody who very much fit the Gauthier mold here, who has athletic ability to be very good, but is very green, very raw, and they lost to Carlos Vera. But like the thing there was that Carlos Vera is weird. Medina's not weird. Medina is the do everything 185, 205 mold with no physicality backing it up. That's the problem. Michael Costa versus Christian Rodriguez. This one is a bit weird because I think this should be even money, but like Costa is a plus 124 to plus 145 underdog, and Rodriguez is coming in at minus 160 to minus 175. I think the issue is just that Rodriguez's wins are being read into a lot because he beat Austin Bashi, who's got a lot of hype, Isaac Dolgarian, who's got a lot of hype, Cameron Simon, who's got a lot of hype, and I don't agree with it, and Raul Rosas Jr. And, that is, I think, risen his, level of, thought here. But, he is a bit undersized at 145. Costa's quite big. He's 3 inches taller. Surprisingly, has an inch less of reach, which is weird, because Costa seems to have a long reach, but apparently it rolls out to only 71 inches. But, I'm really interested in the fight, and I don't have a good read on it, actually. Because I don't again, I look at the competition Rodriguez has fought and it's like, okay, well, Rodriguez is probably the better technical fighter. And then I watch the fights and I'm just like, no, he's just kind of exploiting green areas of fighters. Whereas the guys Costa's fighting aren't so obviously green in areas. And I think that they're actually really equal. But Rodriguez does work at a bit of a higher pace, so I'm going to take that. Costa is less adaptive. He's certainly opportunistic, but he doesn't really adapt his game plan. He'll take an opening if he sees it, but there's nothing to kind of like emphasize that in the fight, as the fight goes on. Whereas Rodriguez, like, there is. Rodriguez, the reason he beat some green fighters is, number one, that he's really, really hard to put away, really, really tough. But, like, another thing is he's very good at mid-fight adapting to a fighter that he didn't have a good idea of what they did to begin with. So I'll take Rodriguez. I am very, very intrigued. This might actually be my fight of the night because I don't really know what to make of it. And like I said, I think the odds should be dead even. I don't think the odds line is like bad, but if you're betting on this one, bet on the underdog. Do not bet on the favorite in this fight. That's all there is to it. So if I do place a bet, it'll be on Costa. Julia Plastri versus Lupi Godinez. Godinez. Don't get me wrong, the split decision against Corey McKenna should not have been split. Plastri clearly won that fight, but Plastri had moments of issues with like somebody who fights Lupi Godinez's game, but is even shorter than Lupi Godinez, even less reach than Lupi Godinez, and is not the athlete Lupi Godinez is not the wrestler either. So I expect Lupi Godinez, for all of her flaws, because she does have a tendency to have to do everything. Box to wrestle, wrestle to box. There's no... Her game historically doesn't really fit together without the other parts of it. It has at moments... the Tabitha Ricci, fight comes to mind. But like a lot of the other ones, like the Emily Ducote fight, even the Elise Reed, Stephanie Calvillo, it's her having to do everything. So, but at the same time, I think she can just do that. I think she can just out-wrestle Plastri, and Plastri's probably the better striker and fights at a higher pace. But Godinez's boxing is not, it's not terrible. And Plastri's not, like if Plastri couldn't take advantage of Corey McKenna's flaws, what are we talking about, really? So I kind of see this as similar to the Sam Hughes fight from 2 weeks ago? Last week? 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. When she beat Stephanie Luciano. Kind of similar to that. Godinez should kind of have her way with her and win by decision. So Godinez is minus 240 to minus 280. Plastri plus 188 to plus 220. Rafa Garcia versus Vince Pichel. This is just an age pick. I think that a younger Vince Pichel could probably pull this out. Kind of like a younger Clay Guida could have beaten Rafa Garcia. Because Garcia does like to wrestle. And you can get Pichel down. But if you're not Gregor Gillespie or Hustam Habilov, you do not overpower him with wrestling. But, yeah, it's just... Pichel is 42 years old. And he still can fight. He can still fight. It's not sad. But it's clear that he's having a hard time keeping up the pace. He's having a hard time imposing himself on fights. And I would assume that Garcia could probably at least wrestle with him to a certain degree, fight at a higher pace, and like kind of do what he did to Clay Guida in a nutshell, which is just like, all right, I am not a striker by trade. I am not a boxer by trade, but my boxing is functional. And you have the old school wrestlers boxing because you're an old man, and I can probably light you up fairly effectively. So Rafa Garcia by decision. He is the favorite, minus 480 to minus 520. Pichel's plus 350 to plus 370. I'm tempted to bet on Pichel at those odds because those are some heavy underdog odds that I don't really think are justified. Jamal Emmers versus Gabriel Miranda. Gabriel Miranda is another not really should be here UFC guy. He's fun because he's hyper aggressive and like goes for submissions and stuff. And Pat Sabatini did catch Jamal Emmers with a heel hook, but no. Emmers is a good enough striker before it starts to break down that he should be able to light up Miranda, and he is a good wrestler and a very good scrambler. So Emmers by TKO. Miranda is fun, action fighter, bottom of the card filler, but and Emmers is not going to be anything because he's 35 years old. But like there was a time when Emmers I think was more than that, and I think that there's still an ability to be UFC caliber and beat UFC caliber guys via a game plan and like a replicatable process. Whereas any wins Miranda gets are going to be, I hit that guy really hard, and he didn't like that I kept coming after him, and eventually we ended up on the ground. And the fact that I am a pretty good jiu-jitsu guy held the day. But I don't know. It shouldn't work. Emmers is minus 350 to minus 400, plus 255 to plus 300 on Miranda. Austin Hubbard versus Markel Medeiros. Is Hubbard the only underdog I'm taking on this card? Spoiler, I'm taking Hubbard. If so, I'm a little disappointed, but it's not. I don't let the betting odds influence my picks generally. The only time I do is I feel like it's absolute coin flip. So I guess I don't know. Okay, you know what? I want to pick some underdogs. Costa to beat Rodriguez. There you go. Because I feel like that's kind of a coin flip fight. I will back Costa because he's the underdog. But yeah, Austin Hubbard here. Medeiros came into the UFC and I was pretty high on him. I was like, this guy's got some pretty good athletic abilities. He's a decently hard hitter. He can wrestle. He can scramble. He's fast. He's explosive. He's looked good on the regional scene. And then he fought Lanny Quinones. And Lanny Quinones is not a terrible fighter by any means. He went out there and had a pretty entertaining fight with Nasrat Haqparast, for example. And Haqparast, we know, is a UFC caliber lightweight. But he's not very good. And Medeiros had some really, really big problems with him. In fact, a lot of people scored that fight for Quinones. I don't think I did. And when I'm watching it back with scouting eyeballs on, I don't necessarily score the fight the same way. So I'd have to go back and look at the podcast and see if I actually thought Quinones won or if Medeiros won. But I picked Medeiros to win that fight, and I kind of realized after that fight that I don't know if Markel Medeiros is actually a good fighter. He's got the building blocks of a good fighter. Like I said, he hits hard. He's existent in all areas. But it came to my attention that his regional fights were a lot of him hitting people really hard and them losing heart. And them not wanting to put themselves back in that position and becoming afraid during the fights. And Quinones wasn't. And like I said, Quinones made it really, really hard for him. And Quinones is borderline UFC talent. We'll put it that way. Austin Hubbard is not going to be afraid when he gets hit. Austin Hubbard cannot be, for lack of a better word, scared out of a fight. He's not a phenomenal fighter in his own right. He's got some serious physical limitations. But he has a good technical striking game and wrestling game. He's got good counter shots. And he doesn't go away. The Max Roshkov fight is probably a great example of that. If you don't remember, Max Roshkov came out and thrashed Austin Hubbard for a round, and it was looking really, 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 really bad. And Hubbard went back into his corner and he regrouped, and he came back out and he beat Roshkov to the point where he quit on the stool, despite his coach Robert Drysdale, I do believe, trying to argue him into continuing. And that's kind of, I don't want to say that's what we're going to see here, because I'm not saying Medeiros is going to quit on the stool. It's that I don't think Medeiros is ready for that kind of pushback that Hubbard's going to do. Hubbard's not going to go away like that. And, as a result, I got to pick Austin Hubbard. And, give some love to the veteran comeback series. I mean, if you're going to say Hubbard being a worse athlete is just going to end up with him losing. He lost to Alex Hernandez and everything, but Alex Hernandez, who has a lot of flaws as a fighter, a tremendous amount. We could be here all night talking about Alexander Hernandez's flaws. But Hubbard came back at him. He had a terrible first round. But he came back at him and made that really, really competitive. And that's kind of it's his deal. He comes back. he delivers back. And, he can lose. He lost to Kurt Hallbaugh. He lost to Vince Pichel. He lost to Joe Selecki. He lost to Mark Madsen. He lost to Davi Hamosh. None of these are guys that have high-end potential in the UFC. Or if they did, like Hamosh did, they never found it. But I'm just not convinced that Medeiros has the mentality that you would need. So I'm going to go with Thud Hubbard to win by decision. So there you go. I am hoping to be wrong. Like, this is one of those picks that I'm making, but I want to be wrong. Because Medeiros is the younger fighter with a higher ceiling here. He's 5 years younger. He actually has the athleticism to make noise, whereas Hubbard is just a tough action fighter guy to be in this exact position. Hubbard is going to be in this spot until the day the UFC is done with him. So, there you go. Anyways, those are the fights. Odds. You can get Hubbard at plus 140 to plus 150, and Medeiros is minus 170 to minus 188. I will be betting on Hubbard. So there you go. I'll be betting on Hubbard and Costa. I think are my two hot picks, and then other than that, I am probably writing. Who else have I got here? I'll probably put a small bet on Vergara. I think he's going to lose, but at plus 2, if I can get him at like plus 225, as he's listed at, I'd be down with that. And like similarly with Kevin Borges, again, an underdog that I think is going to lose, but could win, and Vince Morales. So same deals there, basically. And then a little bit on Drew Dober, and probably a small bet on Brendan Moreno. There you go. That's what I'm doing, and I'll probably formulate a parlay in there somewhere. Because that's enough fights that I can probably find a parlay. Anyways, that is all. And check out the links down below or to the left or the right. I don't know. I don't know where they are on some of these ones. I am on Anchor, or I am on Acast, Spotify, and YouTube. I am also theoretically on Anchor, but like the weird thing with Anchor is that I don't entirely know if Anchor exists as anything but a Spotify exporter now. So there you go. If you're watching on Anchor, please reach out over on Discord or Twitter, and I would love to know that I'm still there. So there you go. Have a good day. Enjoy the fights. And April's going to be a heck of a month because I am in the tax business, and the Canadian deadline is April 30th. So that is going to be fun.